So, what is witnessing and what on earth does it have to do with wisdom? Welcome back to the Indian Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Raj Balkaran. More importantly, you are looking for inspired insight, and you probably enjoy a tale or two. Maybe you enjoy being educated when you least expect it. So, witness consciousness, the witness. What on earth is this? In order to begin to understand what this is and its value for spiritual awareness, spiritual growth, spiritual evolution, one needs to turn one's attention to this little thing called a person. Okay. Let us think about what a human being is. Okay. There are aspects of who and what we are, which are utterly manifest, tangible, uh, fungible, our wonderful meat body or food body, the Annamaya Kosha, is fairly well understood by medical science, give or take. But it's manifest. When we see people, we typically see their physical selves. We know we are much more than physical selves. If only it were that straightforward, right? We can experience the presence of an emotional self, wherein our emotional processing, our habits lie. We are intellectual selves. And ultimately, we are spiritual selves. So you have, if you have been paying attention to yourself and to life, then you will certainly notice that you are not the same as you were 5 years ago, pre-COVID perhaps. But much more than what happened in the outer world in terms of the changes that COVID and the post-COVID fallout have facilitated, have affected in the world, there have been changes in your inner world. Perhaps you are resentful because of having been locked down for so long. Perhaps you have learned some patience. Perhaps, etc., etc., etc. The list goes on and on. Perhaps you were in lockdown with a loved one who was no longer a loved one by the end of lockdown. Perhaps you were in lockdown with someone who became a loved one by the end of lockdown, etc., etc., etc. But it doesn't take these, cataclysmic global events such as the pandemic to facilitate change in your life. And if you pay attention to who you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, provided that you're a human being and you're not in a coma, you will notice that you are seeing the world differently. You will notice that there were people in your life who maybe you wouldn't have in your life anymore. Perhaps there were people you were dating or seeing or married to who you're no longer dating and seeing and married to anymore. Why? Because you see something now that you didn't see then. There was an aspect of the situation to which you were blind. We all have blind spots, without question. Question is whether or not we are collecting blind spots. If this is our hobby, if we're collecting ignorance, or if we are illumining blind spots, if we're whittling away at the crevices that we can't see. And so, by virtue of the fact that you can see, hey, I was quite different 10 years ago, you could infer that there's an aspect of you that is unchanging. There's a frame of reference, right? If all that you are is who you are now, right? You wouldn't be able to see who you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. There is the power of awareness that you can abide in or approximate or call upon so as to see yourself then. And if you have extraordinary self-awareness, you could actually see clearly who you are now in the moment and be cognizant of what you are doing and why you are doing what you are doing. What is it that you seek? What are your attachments? What are your aversions? What is your goal? Why are you upset that this person didn't respond to your text? We always think it's about them. It's never about them. It's about something going on in our brains, in our minds, in our hearts, which we need to understand. Have we attached some meaning to the absence of response? Have we told ourselves a story about, wow, this person doesn't care, etc., etc., etc.? Right? So through awareness and through witnessing one's behavior, one can more deeply understand that behavior and become free of behaviors which are binding, limiting, habitual, instinctive, right? So arguably awareness is a thing that separates life from non-life. Arguably, what do all life forms have in common, which dead things or non-living things may not have in common with living things? Awareness. They are aware of their surroundings. Now, we take this for granted, but really, if you have a watch and the watch becomes aware. Now, clearly, we have watches who know a great many things, can simulate intelligence and awareness. But I mean to say, if you're old school like myself and had this sort of wind watch, and if the watch actually was able to suddenly become aware of its surroundings and question who it was and question who I was and wonder why it was stuck on my wrist, we would see this as a miracle. Well, that miracle is the miracle of life. It's taken millions of years, right, for sophisticated life forms to evolve. But their evolution is part and parcel of their ability, their capacity to be aware, to be cognizant of surroundings, of self, ultimately. So it could be argued that awareness or consciousness is not only the sine qua non, the essential feature of life, but that the cultivation of awareness may well be the meaning, the purpose of human life in some way, shape, or form. Right? So witnessing, when there's a crime committed, and investigators, I'm sure many of you have seen a great number of TV crime shows. Investigators are trying to piece together what happened. Do they generally find a cohesive picture from the 3, 5, 7 eyewitnesses? All of the eyewitnesses were there and they all had eyes, presumably, or the ability to see. And yet, so disparate, so incongruous at times are the reports to which people swear. Now, this is a testament to the extent to which people don't pay clear and careful attention. They're not fully aware. They're partially aware. They're peripherally aware. They may project from their memory, from their hopes, from their fears. But really, as opposed to this sort of unreliable, shoddy eyewitnessing, what we want to do is cultivate the ultimate eyewitnessing, the witnessing of the I, which is ultimately you. Because all the aspects of you will change over the course of the days and the decades. But there is an aspect of you unchanging, which looks upon and registers all that is changing within you. This is a really profound idea, actually, and it's more than an idea, it's an experience. Because as folks delve into spiritual practice, be it meditation, be it yoga postures, asana, be it mantra. Without question, what starts happening is the burgeoning of an awareness of the subtle, of the intangible, an awareness of aspects of reality and aspects of self, which are not bound stringently to the material and to the gross. Implicated therein, but somehow not quite dependent upon gross reality, one develops subtle awareness. And of the subtlest form of awareness actually is awareness itself. It's not becoming aware of subtle reality, where that is an object of the awareness. It is awareness turning upon itself, abiding in itself, realizing itself as the ground of being, as the ground of existing. In the Yoga Sutras, I'm thinking a fair bit about the Yoga Sutras for a course that I'm currently preparing called Yoga Illumined. Not just the sutras, but also the Bhagavad Gita. I think they make a superb complement. But in the Yoga Sutras, quite tersely and quite profoundly, yoga is simply defined as the cessation of the fluctuations of mind. Right? And immediately after that, the sutras say, and then tada drashtu sarupe avasthanam. And then the seer abides in its own state. Well, who is the seer? Who is the watcher? This is the ultimate self. This is the witness. This is the Atman. Atman equals approximately witnessing, because selfhood and seeing are inextricable. Our ultimate self is seeing power. Not the seen, the seer itself. Seeing itself. Otherwise put, witnessing. There's a parable from the Upanishads about two birds in a tree. Let's call it the tree of life. And one bird eats the fruit of the tree, sweet and sour, rejoicing, recoiling, pleasure, pain. And the second bird watches on in peace. Not so much a bird brain. This one has the capacity to witness. Now, that witness consciousness is variously understood as the Atman, the self, or in the language of yoga, Sankhya philosophy, Purusha, spirit, if you will. Or in the language of Śiva schools of thought, to Tantric schools of thought, it's Śiva. Śiva is that awareness. Śiva is the dynamic awareness which watches, which has no power to do. Shakti, his other half, is consort. She is the doing, she is the done, she is the field of karma. Maybe a tail, maybe a teeny tiny tail might illumine some of this witness nonsense about which I'm going on. So a long time ago, a demon, Taraka, had took over the heaven and was terrorizing the gods. An old trope indeed. Taraka's greatest strength was that he could only be defeated by a child of Śiva. That was his boon. Everyone's got to have something special about them. He can only be defeated by a child of the great ascetic Śiva. But wait a minute. If Shiva's a great ascetic, and ascetics are known for practicing brahmacharya, or the retention of their libidinal energy, the preservation and the sublimation of the libidinal energy, if such is an ascetic, and if he's a great ascetic, how on earth can he have a child? Yes, that's why Taraka wanted this boon, because he thought it would grant him immortality. These deities, these beings, these asuras are always doing great penance, earning a boon, They're not allowed to have immortality because their cousins, the gods, coveted the elixir of life for themselves. So the next best thing is to do a whole bunch of sadhana and craft a boon that you think will serve as, you know, immortality in effect. And there's always the loophole. So here we go. So what happens? Indra, the king of the gods, imagine he's upset, he's been usurped, he's been dethroned. He decides to send down the god of desire, Kama. Think ancient Indian Cupid, perhaps. He sent Kama down to Shiva's mountainous abode because what does he want to do? He wants to kindle desire in Shiva so that Shiva may procreate, so that they may be granted their savior, and so that they may retain their power in heaven. Okay. So Kama goes down to Kailasha, to the mountaintop, to do his thing, to do what he's supposed to do. His task is to make sure that Shiva falls in love with the beautiful daughter of the mountain, Parvati, the lovely Parvati. Parvati actually loved Shiva greatly, and she'd always really longed to be with him. Shiva's a little bit aloof. I mean, he kind of goes into meditative states and, like, he never answers his text messages, honestly. So difficult to get a hold of. But she's pretty patient, and part of her kind of admired his stoic inward turning spiritual thing. Okay. So Kama arrives on the scene and he sees Shiva meditating. His eyes were closed, his consciousness one with the one. Because there's only one. We appear as many. But guess what? I've got news for you. The self? Myself? Or yourself? Yes. There is one self. This is the mysterious paradox of human existence. There's one spark of consciousness that we all share and misidentify as our own. Right? We are ultimately a wave, but we behave as particles. Much to be said about the metaphysics of human life and physics, actually, and the particle wave nature of light. But more physics comparisons another day. But we really are energetically a wave. The divine is this wave of witness consciousness. And when we measure it, the wave function collapses. And we are as if particles. But this aspect of our nature is ultimately illusory. And there's so profound wisdom in the idea that the ancient Indians have this profound insight that all that we perceive as real isn't really real. I mean, it's cogent in a sense. It's cohesive, obviously, but it's not real. That ultimately it's all spanda, or vibration, waves, if you will, energy. And really, it's called Maya. Now, Maya is from the verbal root ma, to measure. Just grok this idea. What they're saying is all that can be measured is illusory. Reality is immeasurable. So anyhow, here we are, these waves of witness energy, the wave function collapsed by the measuring Maya, which is the ego self. Shiva's one with the one, meditating, his eyes closed. Right? He wasn't quite aware of his immediate surroundings. He was connected to source, which he happened to be. One could say this is quite self-serving, but as long as you understand it's capital S self and not lower S self. Parvati, the beautiful, benevolent daughter of the mountain, was close by. She was kind of, parading about Shiva's shack. And Kama, he saw his chance. He let loose his arrow of Eros, which struck the Lord, whose eyes fluttered open, and his awareness returned to the scene. His awareness, the collapse of the wave function. Metaphorically speaking, perhaps. His awareness returned to his particle state, to his particularity, to his body consciousness, and where it was located in space. Because when you're one with the one, you're connected with the Wi-Fi that pervades all of creation, not just the hardware and software of your local reality. And, while he became present of that reality, it was also present of the intoxicating presence of the lovely, delightful goddess Parvati. And he was so enticed by her radiance, her beauty inner and out. In that moment, Shiva wanted nothing more than to love Parvati and to express his love physically by becoming one with her. He desired to enjoy the pleasures of embodied existence. But a split second later, he came to, as it were, he returned to his yogic senses and realized that this shift in his consciousness had been caused by kama, desire, pun intended. Right? This is a mythologization of, to my mind, most Indic myth is a dramatization of the inner world, right? Of psycho-spiritual processes. But he realized that kama had interrupted his trance, pun intended, and he was annoyed, felt a little bit violated. A wave of spiritual power, energy, surged up through Shiva. His third eye opened, and from it, an intense blast of yogic fire emanated, instantly incinerating kama. Bye-bye, kama. Well, that's one way to get rid of desire, isn't it? Kama was destroyed. But his deed was done. His arrow did hit Shiva before he was incinerated. Shiva, the great ascetic, was in love. He returned his gaze to Parvati, and their eyes locked in loving exchange. Eternity seemed to pass between their glances, and the rapture of their union overtook them. But after a time, a deep concern arose in Parvati. Great Lord, Shiva, now that kama is destroyed, he can no longer kindle desire among the beings of earth. They will now isolate themselves and die out. Do you not understand that desire is the most primal and important force in all of Prakriti, material creation? Surely this fate cannot come to pass for the beings of the earth. Shiva was so enchanted with her. He replied, Your beauty is matched only by your wisdom, my love, he replied. Sure, I'll resurrect kama in spirit, so that desire may dwell in the creatures of earth and they may propagate and enjoy material existence. Although I personally have no use for kama, for desire. You sure about that, Shiva? Asked Parvati. Her mood had shifted. Her loving gaze faded, and her manner became more serious, foreboding even. Shiva thoughtlessly continued, Of course, desire. Come on, I'm a great yogi. I've raised my spiritual power to the point of transcending desire. Do you not realize this? Though he did not know it, Shiva had sparked a deep anger, resentment within Parvati. She resented his ignorance and the ways in which he was demonizing desire and demonizing material creation. The light and color of her complexion drained, and her presence expanded, darkening the very mountains. Even the mighty Shiva trembled as her field grew darker and larger and blacker still, as a gaping black hole, powerful enough to devour the galaxy. Even he fell to the ground in utter submission, in utter reverence and astonishment at the majestic, even maniacal force before him. For he was no longer in the presence of Parvati. Before him instead was Kālī, the feminine force of all creation, withdrawn from the universe, unbridled Shakti itself. It was Kālī, manifest in her most great and terrifying form. Shiva lay lifeless, corpse-like, utterly still before her. Kālī loomed over him, and her terrible laughter echoed, cackling through the cosmos. And then she spoke these unforgettable words. You are the consciousness, the seeing power, the witness of the universe. I am its energy, its dynamism, its name, its form. Without my power, all beings merely lie inert as you do now. I am the primordial power that propels the galaxies and all beings within the cosmos. I am desire, without which there is no action. Even your meditation is born of desire. How else could it be? Do you not see this? You are the walker, but I am the walk. You are the dancer, and I the dance. And how indeed can you separate the two? But when my Shakti, when my power, when my energy is removed from you, when you are bereft of such, you are awareness alone, impotent, incapable of action. Now that you have seen, now that you know the power of desire, allow me to return my energy to you. Behold my colossal power as I return it to the universe and all beings within it, including you, great Lord. This tale was actually told to shed light on śavāsana, corpse pose. Shiva is a shava, a corpse without Shakti. Shiva learned a great lesson that day about the power of Shakti, the feminine divine, and its relationship to the universe and to desire. He learned what it's like to be completely inert and witness creation's dynamic play. When Kālī withdraws from Shiva, he is little more than shava, a corpse. And so, as you embrace the inert stillness of śavāsana, practice witnessing. Cease becoming for that time. Cease having time for that time. Embrace being alone. The practice of divine inertia, of śavāsana, the capacity for witnessing from stillness can come to accompany you, even as you move through the turbulence of life. Now, we're all aware that these can be quite trying times. We've spoken in last week's episode about the wisdom of breath and stillness and the wisdom of trees. And perhaps the wisdom of witnessing is an extension thereof. Yes. Witnessing, watching is being. Acting is becoming. It is possible to act without incurring karmic residue if one does so while witnessing. Most of us don't act. In the vast, vast majority of situations, we react. The actions we undertake are spontaneous, impulsive reactions to the stimuli about us, of which there are many. In order to truly act, there needs to be space between the stimulus and the response. And that is a space of consciousness. That is a space of awareness. That is the space that renders the response conscious, a purposeful, deliberate response in full awareness of what is being done and why it is being done. Absent this, we are merely links in the causal chain of action-reaction. And this is how we live out our days, perpetually provoked by the stimuli around us. What if we can find the space to witness? We'll not be pulled into Prakriti. We will be able to enjoy it. We'll be able to navigate it rather than being fettered by it, bound by it. Such is the power of awareness. And this is the wisdom of witnessing. With any luck, you've had nearly as much fun as I have today, please continue listening. I would love if you could share this content if you think it would be of service to others. Please do share, like, feel free to reach out to me to request further content. And also you may wish to study with me at the Indian Wisdom School. Until next time, keep well, keep practicing, keep listening, and keep witnessing. Namaste.